In this video, I want to share with you the origin stories of runes and where do they come from. But before diving deeper into those origin stories, I want to share or bring something out that is, I believe, very important. While learning about the runes, taking courses, practicing rune magic, working with people on the energy level using runes, preparing materials for the rune course as well as for this video, an interesting concept came in my research that the runes back in the day, in the ancient times, they were quite common, and they weren't just scratches on the wall or a stone. They had the magic. People believed in their power that they could actually change the reality they were living, and they were using the runes in their everyday life. A warrior would know what runes to put on an axe or sword or shield in order to improve the chances of winning the battle. A fisherman would use runes to catch fish. People would use runes to clear the energy of their house or to protect their houses, and so on and so on. There are many different implications, many ways you can use runes in your everyday life to help you manifest what you want and change the reality. And of course, there was a difference when a farmer or a mage would be using the runes. The only difference was the deepness of knowledge that a person turning to runes would have. So for something of everyday life, you would just do it yourself. But for something major, or to get a clarity or something important, going to battle, going to the raid, buying a house, getting married, or finding the loved one, then you would turn to a mage, we actually turn to the runes through a mage and discover the clarity that you want in order to make that decision. Unfortunately, most of that knowledge has been lost throughout the centuries, and right now just being uncovered, little stone by stone, to bring out the true power of the runes and graphic magic in general. So it can actually help us as humans to bring out our inner talents, to awake our supernatural abilities and kind of become the humans on the cosmic scale. Because there's an interesting fact that in the northern tradition, the northern gods, the Aesir, they were much closer to humans than in many other traditions. The northern gods, they knew failure, they fall in love, they get sick or sometimes even die. And as humans, they also used runes, as a lot of ancient scripts suggest, which kind of also, again, leads to the question, where do the runes come from? Where's their origin? And there's no just one answer. There are several of them. And in this video, I will share you the stories that I have found in my research. So the first account of the origin of the runes, or where do they come from, is the mythological one. And it's a story led by Odin, the Old Father. And as they say, any creative thing starts with a choice. So Odin, the Old Father, the head of the Aesir gods, was facing this challenge. Chaos was destroying the worlds of Yggdrasil, and he needed a much deeper knowing and much deeper understanding of how he can protect the worlds that he was building. So he overheard dwarves talking about these ancient scratches and symbols that hold the power of fate and form, that they were given to them by some ancient beings, even that were beyond gods, that were before the gods. And those were the runes. He also heard that they got these symbols from Mimir as well. However, the access to that well was sealed a long time ago, like when the time even didn't exist. However, he also knew that there was a spring of Urd that was connected to the Mimir as well, and this spring was under the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil. So he went there to find this source, to find this deep knowledge, and that's where he met this giant guarding this place. We later find out that the name of the giant was Mimir, and they have this conversation about how Odin can gain the knowledge of the runes. And they discover that Odin needs to pay the price. He needs to give something of his own in order to get this knowledge. There has to be energy exchange. So he gives out his own eye, and he suffers and surrenders in order to receive this knowledge. He, in a sense, communicates with the ancient beings because they are the ones who are holding those powers, and they give them the access to the runes, to the symbols. Some accounts say that he saw them shimmering on the surface of the water. Others say that he saw them on the branches of the Yggdrasil, falling down and receive these visions of these symbols. But one thing is for sure, Mimir was not the one who gave him the runes. Mimir was just guarding the place, was guarding the access. Another variation of the same story is that Odin already knew about the existence of these ancient symbols and their power, and that he would have to pay a great price for them. And those accounts say that he had this fear of sacrifice. He knew that the price would be big. And of course, we all heard of this fearless leader of Aesir god, Odin, the Allfather. However, the sources, the tales before Edda, that's what's heavily influenced by the Christian tradition, they talk about that he did have the fear of this sacrifice. However, when he understood that he does need this knowledge in order to stop the chaos, he made that choice to overcome this fear. It's just like people who are brave, they also have fear. They just learn how to overcome it. So Odin made that choice, made this sacrifice. He created this energy exchange to receive this knowledge. And from this mythological account of rune creation, we can reach two conclusions. One, that dwarves, giants, elves existed before the gods. That Odin was not the one who created them. They either came there by their own will to the worlds of Yggdrasil or existed before. Also, the source of the runes, the Mimir's well. The Mimir is just the name of the giant who was guarding the well itself. It's not. We lost the name of the well, of where it's actually coming from itself. The other important part is that the runes themselves, the symbols, are more ancient than the gods themselves. They come from beyond the gods, before the gods awoken. And the important part that in order to receive that knowledge, in order to receive the knowledge of cosmos, there has to be energy exchange. You do have to go through certain trials and to make certain difficult decisions and choices, overcoming fear. That's why I also know in my practice that a lot of people do fear runes because there is this mystical part behind them. So this is the first account, the first mystical, mythological version of the origin of the runes. Another mystical story of the rune origin is actually much darker, and I was surprised to find it myself because this one is much lesser known than the first one when the Odin brought the runes. This story talks about this black school of magic, or school of black magic, somewhere up in the north of Norway, buried in the mountains or even under the earth itself. And the master of this school was Devil. And all the powerful mages across the world, across the realms, would go to that school to study the deep knowledge of how to bend fate, how to bend reality, all this secret knowledge. There were no teachers. It was in full darkness. Only the books with fire letters existed there. And those who were searching for this secret mystic knowledge would go to that school to study all of it. And this school was run by one rule: the one who leaves the last cannot leave. He has to stay, he has to be sacrificed. So those who were hungry for knowledge went there, and not a lot of them survived. Not a lot of them came back. And those who came back never came back the same. And that's not the end of the story. In Iceland, there's an interesting tale of three friends who went to that school to study this mystic knowledge. And after they spent a lot of time there learning those ancient scripts and learning the ancient knowledge, they decided to leave. And one of them volunteered to stay behind. And while all of them were leaving, he put a loose cloak on himself. So when the devil, or the hand of the devil, was grabbing him and saying, "You're mine now because you were the last one to leave," he only got his cloak and he was able to get out, and the door was shut and only hurting his heel. The other variation of that same story goes that devil didn't go for the cloak, but for the shadow of that person. And that guy ended up living his life, the rest of his life, without the shadow of his own shadow. So the main thing here in this story, and again, even though it sounds pretty grim and pretty dark, the main thing is this: that the story also goes that when the gods figured out that the runes, because the runes were studied and were developed in that school, the legend goes. So when the runes were got out, when the knowledge of the runes, of these powerful symbols, of this powerful mystic knowledge got out into the world, that's when the gods decided just to kind of make it open source and gave it to everybody, so that non-mortal, not any just one single mortal soul will hold these powerful tools. So they were able to give it to everybody else. This is a pretty neat story. And there's the link on the description will be to the sources to the story if you decided to go deeper and discover more details about it. The third account of where the runes come from is a historic one, and it might not be as mystical or mythological as the previous one with the Odin and the School of Black Magic. But let's not argue with these historians and see maybe we can still discover some magic in what they claim to be. So a lot of researchers, a lot of archaeologists and historians claim that runes are just a natural evolution of the cave paintings. However, if you start looking at the comparing cave paintings and runes, you will find that the runes have much more strict lines when cave paintings are much more curvy. In addition to that, cave paintings, they picture certain event, certain snippet of time that happened. So if we agree with historians, then one symbol as a rune would have this meaning of that whole time event, including the people, cause and effect, the relationships and everything, kind of holding that energy, the archetype of what happened in the past through just one symbol. So unpacking that symbol in the present would bring out certain energy, kind of like unpacking that genie in the bottle. So back in the day, somebody wrote that symbol and included, invested, charged that symbol with certain meaning. They put that and sealed it. So without not knowing how to unlock that kind of chest with the secret, it's hard. They're just marks on the wall. But when you tap into that energy and you kind of communicate with that chest of the secret, or the genie in the bottle, then you can reveal that snippet of time that happened in the past, and that energy would influence the present moment, which kind of makes runes themselves as representations of living events that happened in the past. And we can use them in today's world to enhance our reality, to bring those visuals, to bring those time snippets and influence what we experience today. The fourth origin stories of where runes come from is also a historical one. A lot of historians see runes just as an alphabet. So it's kind of developed as the way for people to communicate. There was a time when people believed in magic and they used the rune for magic, and then with time they just began to use it as words, as an alphabet. That's one of the way to explain it. However, the thing was that runes, everybody already knew runes, so inventing a new language didn't make much sense. And up in the north, people were worried more about survival than creating a totally new language. So they just adapted the symbols that they already had kind of up and started using them as language. So the magic power of the runes were never destroyed. They were still there. They were just kind of packed in a secret. Also, there's a lot of sources that claim that there were different types of runes, that humans had their own runes, elves and dwarves and giants and different spirits have their own runes and their own alphabets, their own magic, their own ways, their own symbols of communication, or bringing those energy, those archetypes to life. So even through that, even seeing that runes are just the writing systems that some claim that came from Rome because of Germanic mercenaries or merchants, or have origin in some Greek letters or some other things, doesn't really fall into that critics, because runes as an alphabet started from the sagas, from the ancient sources. They literally say that they were used for magic. They were used to influence the reality. And of course, you can believe all these stories. I mean, these are just the stories of the runes' origins. You don't have to believe them yourself. I didn't believe them myself personally when I heard about runes. And the only way that I know now that it is true that they do have the power to kind of bend the reality and change lives of many people is through practice. Because practice is the sole criteria for testing the truth. So it's up to you to believe or not believe one of the versions of the rune origin. There's probably a lot more different variations of where they come from. And, if you enjoyed this video or like to learn more about runes and magic and how it can change your life for the better, you're welcome to always to reach out with questions. Subscribe, leave a like, and there will be more videos on the topic of runes and rune magic to come. And I'll see you when I see you.